I think all of you mentioned it was important to have that legal framework, because if people can do what they want and we cannot stop that, then your first line is gone, and you can try and build community harmony, but without the ability to tell people to stop burning other people's holy books or saying nasty things about other religions, you are going to create a spiral of negativity, right? Now, clearly, if that is so in the physical world, in the physical space, you must have a similar framework in the virtual world as well. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Would any of you like to comment on that?
If I may.
Yes.
I think for religious group, perhaps the virtual world, in terms of its technology and the effect, is something that we are trying to handle it. Because
Yes.
I think at the rate that the virtual world handles and sends out messages, it's very fast. The coverage is very wide. And I think fake news is not something very new. I think it's been around.
Yes.
And
But it has faster legs.
Yes, now it's even faster. Yes. And certainly I think it is something which religious group must come and seriously think about it.
Yes.
And work together with legislation. And I think this problem is a multi-pronged problem whereby it needs a multi-pronged solution.
Yes. I mean, just like how we dealt with the issues in the real world, physical world, we need to be able to deal with it swiftly in the virtual world, which means government must have the powers to handle it quickly and swiftly. At the same time, the religious leadership must also be able to react quickly to tell your flock and your people what the truth is. And all of us have to work together. And government needs these powers. You need to be able to act. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. One example, I think, would illustrate what I mean. Again, it's from the physical world, but I think it applies equally to the virtual world. All of you, certainly the Catholic Church, will be aware of Charlie Hebdo. I think the Catholic Church in particular has been the subject of a whole series of unfortunate caricatures by this particular newspaper, apart from Muslims. And I haven't made a point of reading it, so I don't know whether the Protestant churches have been subject, but I wouldn't be surprised. We don't allow that in Singapore. And we say freedom of speech doesn't extend to that. And we must take the same approach in the virtual world as well. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Right. The focus of this select committee is specifically on deliberate online falsehoods. That means people sitting somewhere deliberately creating falsehoods online. And of course, it can then be passed on by a whole series of other actors, and how it impacts on society, what are the measures we take, and impact on religion, focusing and exploiting religious divisions, can be a key part of it, which is why I think we are talking to you as well and getting your viewpoints. Another point, so coming back to your point about you pray so, I think the reason why I spent a few minutes talking about the current situation is to really point out that there is nothing, I was going to say God-given, but there is nothing given about it. It is a result of a lot of effort and a delicate mix, and a mix that can easily be undone. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
At the drop of a pin.
Yes. And now if I can specifically look at the individual representations, the National Council of Churches, you sent in a representation on the 6th of March. You have listed some of the issues, steps that can be taken as voluntary measures. And you point out at page 3, second paragraph, that these voluntary measures are not very effective in removing illegal content. That is, that's been your own experience as well? You've seen that, or you've seen research suggesting that, right?
Yes, that particular section deals with voluntary measures by the industry,
Yes.
by social media platforms.
Right.
And research has shown that it is not entirely effective.
Yes.
In fact, it is quite ineffective.
Right. Thank you. And you've also said it, the third paragraph, that social media platforms can no longer be seen just as platforms, but must bear responsibility for the content they publish. Would you care to explain a little bit about that?
Well, that's based on the research by Konrad Nikowitz that I quoted in that particular section, that we quoted in that particular section. And in his paper, he suggests that perhaps social media platforms should not be seen as internet intermediaries or platforms, but they should be regarded as social media companies.
Yes.
Which then would place them under the usual press laws.
Right.
So that is the suggestion.
Right.
And I think there is merit in that suggestion.
Right.
I think some founders of social media, like Facebook, for example, have acknowledged the fact that they should be seen as a company rather than as a platform, which means that the current press laws can then be applied to them, and they can be held responsible for the articles that they carry.
Right. And page 4, the third paragraph. Sorry, page 3, the fourth paragraph first. I skipped page 3, the fourth paragraph. You point out that social media platforms should be required to correct and take down false information. Why do you think that is important?
Well, I think it's important for social media agencies, platforms, companies to take some responsibility for the articles that they carry. And I think the onus is on them in some ways to ensure that the articles that they carry do not cause any distortions that might result in conflicts or whatever. So it's just basically placing the responsibility on the shoulders of social media platforms, which can be regarded as companies.
But all of this would come to nothing if the government is not able to direct them to do so.
Yes, exactly.
And so we come to the next point, page 4, third paragraph.
Yes.
Government has got to consider legislation, as you point out.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. And you refer to the example of some other countries
Yes.
as well. Now, you make this point in page 5, last paragraph, that trust is key and critical between communities as well as between government and the people.
Yes.
I agree with you entirely. But let me give you this scenario, which I think will not be something that will be new to you, because you have now looked at what Carol Soon has said and others have said, and Dr. Matthews. The very purpose of DOF, I call it DOF, Deliberate Online Falsehood, is to exploit divisions between one type of Christian and another type of Christian, between a Christian and a Muslim and a Hindu and a Buddhist and an atheist and other religionists, between people of different races. The whole purpose is to divide, create distrust. So deliberate online falsehood specifically goes against what you have pointed out, which is that the trust is important.
Yes. Yes.
That, I think, shows how important it is to deal with deliberate online falsehoods. Would you say that?
Indeed. Minister, my point is that measures should be implemented, both legislative measures and non-legislative measures. They are very, very important. If need be, new laws should be introduced to tackle misinformation. But I think what is important is the cultural ethos of a particular country or society.
Yes.
And it is important to more positively nurture a culture of candor, a culture of trust, so that people can be a little bit more discerning. I call it social resilience.
Yes.
A little bit more discerning when they encounter something that appears to cast a negative light
Yes.
on our government or on a particular faith community or whatever, or a particular sector of society.
Yes.
Right? That immediately, some alarm bells may ring.
Yes.
Because of the trust that already exists.
Has been built up. The
Yeah.
immunization.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair point. It's a point that others make. The problem is so multifaceted, so many different aspects to it, that there is probably no one silver bullet. You have to build up immunity within the community. You have to get people to be more savvy. You have to focus on public education. You have to focus on fact checking. You also have to have the legislative levers and tools to get the internet companies to do some of these things, and also to, for example, take down, some material if it, is obviously inflammatory and comes within the framework of a deliberate online falsehood. So you need to consider a suite of measures to preserve the racial and religious harmony in Singapore. Mr. Ahchak, I see you nodding. So you agree with these as well?
Absolutely. I think
you.
we definitely all have a part to play, and legislation definitely has its part to play. But I think, if I may say so, Dr. Roland also alludes to the point of where in public discussion, there could also be public education.
Has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that has to go hand in hand.
Yes.
You can't have
That's
one
right.
without
No
the other.
one silver bullet. I think you have to educate people on the dangers of DOF. You have to educate your people on both your own theology, because now there is a lot of alternate theology out there,
Yes.
which is DOF in its own way.
Right.
And you have to educate your people on tolerance, which you do, but you have even more work now to do. And then we have to talk about fact checking.
Yes.
We have to talk about a whole series of measures. So I don't think it is suggested that any one of them, just like any one of them would be enough, right?
Yeah.
But just like in the physical world, everybody knows in Singapore, you do these things, the government will come and charge you.
Right.
If you, at the same time, you are encouraged to understand other religions. I can't by fiat or law say that, but the community leaders and religious leaders can say that, and you have been doing it. Encourage, and then our schools, our social ethos, our social policies. So a whole lot of things have to go hand in hand. Would that be your main point, Mr. Ahchak?
Yes.
Right.
Definitely.